Voting Rights Act and the important work that we need to do.
Well, let me tell you, I'm so happy to see you once again. If only we were together in person.
Yes.
And you are so extraordinary and such a leader and such an inspiration to so many of us. And you know, when you said we still have to fight for voting rights, I often paraphrase your mother,
Yes.
Etta Scott King, and the way that I paraphrase it, and I think of it all the time. When she, and I'll paraphrase, but you know this in your heart, when she admonished us that the fight for justice and civil rights must be fought and won with each generation, right?
She said it. She said, struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation.
Right?
That's right.
The way that I hear her and listen to her and take her advice is I think she was telling us that it's the very nature of these struggles, that whatever we gain, it won't be permanent. And so
exactly.
If the nature of it, let's not despair, let's just deal with it because it's the nature of it.
Yes, exactly.
How are you doing? You're in Alabama right now, right?
I'm in Montgomery. And as you know, Montgomery is where the civil rights movement starts, the cradle of the civil rights movement. And I'm in a very historic building. If it were not for this place, the Bricklayers Hall in Montgomery, Alabama, I'm not sure where we would be today, because it is from this place. I'm actually sitting in the place where my father had his permanent office as the president of the Montgomery Improvement Association. As you know, he was catapulted into leadership of that organization to lead the boycott. After the first day that they boycotted is when they conceptualized this organization. And I'm in this building. I feel his presence here with me. And this building was so important and sacred because from this building, it was the command center. A lot of strategy sessions were held here. And just upstairs from me is where the operations of the carpool took place. So Ms. Rosa Parks, Joanna Robinson, you know, all those wonderful women and men, and my father, they ran the boycott from this space where I am right now. And that was a seminal event, that boycott for our nation, because it laid the foundation for the first nonviolent movement in America, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. And if it were not for that boycott, I don't think we would have gotten to the sit-ins and the freedom rides, and then what happened in Birmingham, and then, you know, Selma with now the Voting Rights Act. So this place where I am is an important place, and I'm glad to be here today to talk about it. And maybe I had to come back here to stir some things up, a movement, to really get this done once and for all.
And that's not only your birthright, but all the work that you've done in your life, which has always been about fighting for civil rights and continuing with just all of the legacy and carrying the baton and really just inspiring. You know, and the Bricklayers Hall, if I recall, it was a Black union.
A Black union, yes, definitely. And they were here because they tried to move in so many other places and churches, but people kept getting threats. But they invited them here, and this became the solid rock and foundation for the rest of that boycott. And it was here upstairs where my father met with a group of religious leaders and called an end to the boycott.
And so, he was 6 in 19.
He was 20. Let's see. This was 1956. He would have been 27 when the boycott ended. 26 when it started.
You know, one of the things that inspires me right now, on behalf of our administration, heading up the Labor Council, and your father's work that was about the work of, you know, until his dying day, joining the movements around workers' rights with civil rights and economic justice, understand the interconnection between that and racial justice. It's so profound what his vision and how that fight still is a fight that we need to wage.
Indeed. In fact, he had a book that's out now called All Labor Has Dignity.
Right.
Yes.
Right. That's right. I've actually read some of his speeches. Tell me something. I know it was before you were born, but from your mother, from your father, it just, the stories that you've heard over the years from their friends, what do you think life was like for them back in those days in the mid-50s, and then leading up, of course, to the anniversary we celebrate today, which is the 56th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act? What do you think, what was life like for them in terms of their commitment and such sacrifice they made?
Well, you know, if my mother told us, she felt like she was a part of something so significant,
Yeah.
and it brought such meaning and purpose to her life. It was a difficult time for Black people, a very scary time. But they had each other as a community, and some allies, obviously, as well. And it was that bond that really gave them the strength to fight these fights. And the way that they stood together and worked together was just so inspiring to hear about. And, you know, if there's anything I can say to people right now, as people are working in a lot of different pockets across this nation on this very important issue to our democracy, this is about saving our democracy.
Right.
It's not a conversation just about voting rights for Black people. This is about the core and the foundation of who we are as a democracy. And it's about saving that for all people in all generations. Right. And as people are working together, you know, I think about what my father challenged us with. He said in his book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos of Community, he said, our nettlesome task is to organize our strength into compelling power. And while people are working in these different pockets, I keep saying, how do we better coordinate in the collaboration so that we're walking in a syncopated manner, so that the messaging is loud and clear and even the youngest ear can understand it. And that's the work that we have to do so that we can increase the troops in this army that's marching towards getting the securing of the For the People's Act and the John Lewis Voter Advancement Act, because we need everybody's hands on deck. No matter, this is beyond party. This is not a partisan issue. This is a democracy issue.
But so to your point, and that quote from your father about compelling the power. So this week, the Johnson sisters, LBJ's daughters, came to Washington. And I spent some time in particular talking with both of them, in particular the Lucy Baines Johnson. And one of the things that your father, I think, was one of the first to really articulate was the importance of the inside-outside strategy, right? Yes. And so he understood, and I think Johnson understood, that it was important for all of that to happen. And your father really did, he understood the influence he could have to what was happening on the inside, both in terms of what is morally right, but also the pressure that needs to be placed appropriately to have the people that are inside these institutions actually act.
Exactly.
And how do you think then that the young leaders of today should be thinking about what he profiled, what he modeled for us, what your father modeled for us in terms of the significance and the importance of a strategy that understands there is the inside the system and there is the outside of the system and the roles that each must play?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question, because what we do through the King Center, where I serve as the CEO, is we educate and train people about those strategies, right. And the steps of nonviolence that's grounded in the principles. You know, the inside strategy that we call negotiation, the outside strategy you call direct action, and how they have to work hand in hand. It's not one or the other, it's both and. And my father had this dynamic with President Johnson where he could go in and speak to him. And yet he went outside and added pressure, because as you remember, when he left meeting with President Johnson around the Voting Rights Act, and he met more than one time with him, you all. So it's an ongoing effort. You know, he said, we got to find a way to give him some power. And so I'm going to say to you, because you opened up this question, I don't know. Are you familiar with the story of Esther in the Bible?
Yes.
You are. Well, I'm going to say this to you as a woman of God, which I am, is that you are our Esther. And I mean this very sincerely, because the Holy Spirit laid this on my heart last night as I was thinking about my conversation with you. You've come to this position now. You've been put in place as the person to really, help usher this in for the administration. And you've been chosen for this assignment. And so I'm adding some of the pressure to say, work your work, because you came out of that Senate. You know those senators. It's not something you served years and years and years ago. And so, yes, it's going to take time. And as I told you, my father had to meet over and over again. And at some point, I said this to some people gathered when we talk about voting rights. There's the chronos moment, which is the clock. This is going to happen at 5:00 p.m. on such and such a day. And then there's this kairos moment where divine power meets our natural circumstance, and we see a breakthrough. And so as you move and step time on the clock and working with those senators, as we move, continuing to push the pressure with you and with the senators, something's going to break. I come from that. I believe in that. My mother used to say the darkest hour is before the dawn. The only thing I can get to ask the vice president is, when is the darkest moment? How do you know when it comes? But I held on to the fact that the dawn is coming. Yes. So we've got to be encouraged as we move. As you said, it comes. It's a natural part of life that we have these ongoing struggles, and we got to keep the pressure applied from every angle, every approach, as you do your assignment, because you are our Esther. You've been chosen to save us in this moment, this democracy. This is about saving our democracy now. And so you're anointed for that task. You're anointed for that task. And I'm going to say it again, you're anointed for that task.
Together, you and I and all the friends who are on this Instagram Live, we are all in this together, but I couldn't agree.
We are.
We've got to pass the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
It's very serious.
We'll be up at the Senate tomorrow, and I will be there talking with my former colleagues in the Senate as often as possible about why they should feel compelled, all of them, to step up on this issue. And there are many leaders that we do have in the Senate. The person I talked to most recently is Senator Raphael Warnock.
Yes, our senator from Georgia.
Yes, and he has been among the leaders on this issue in the Senate, an incredible leader. And so I will continue to support his leadership from inside as we do what we need to do. Tell me something. How do you think about then what the approach is, and in terms of how you teach? Help us and teach us. How can we get more people to see what is at stake and engage more people in this fight to protect voting rights, to strengthen voting rights? What do you find?
I think about when my father was in jail once, and he just had an ordinary conversation with the jail keepers. And they were talking about, the conditions and their wages that they were being paid. And he said, you all ought to be out here with us marching. It's don't count anybody out.
Right.
We need to have as many conversations with anybody about this issue. I can't say it enough. This is not a Democrat issue or Republican. This is a for the people issue.
That's exactly.
No pun intended. And we have to be courageous enough to have conversations with everyday people and find that connection point so that they understand how critical this is past this moment. Yeah. Because if these things don't pass and all of those pieces of legislation across the state, end up taking control, we are going to be set back for a long time. And it's going to affect so many communities, young people. It's going to affect those in rural settings. It's going to affect, Black people. It's going to affect white people. It's going to affect, brown people. It's going to affect everybody.
Well, the way I
and our democracy again.
Well, that's right. And
because your vote will not be respected. There's a chance that what you voted for will be turned over it will be overturned.
Right. I mean, I think about it that voting rights unlock every other right. Right.
Yes,
And, you know, I mean, even if you think about it in terms of all the people who stood in line in 2020,
exactly.
stood in line to vote, or they filled out their ballot and they put it in a drop box or they mailed it in, they said, we're voting because we want the child tax credit. We want to lift America's children out of poverty. And they got that. They voted because they said, if we're going to be in this pandemic, we want to have unemployment benefits for people, or the $1,400 checks, so that people don't lose everything and they have a way to survive. And they got that. There are things that people got because they voted, because this is what they wanted.
Exactly.
Choice about what they wanted their government to do. And because they voted, that's what happened. And I think that's a part of it too, which is about the strength and the power of the voice through the vote to determine how decisions are being made that impact your life, your family's life, your children's life, and the future of your country, much less your world. But there's
Exactly.
so much at stake. And for everyone who's joined us, just continue to talk to everybody, you know, about how serious this is, you know, and it's not election time this week or this month, but it's coming up, and we want to make sure that when it comes time for an election that will make a decision about your community, we want to make sure that you have all access to your right to vote, and that it is not obstructed, it is not made more difficult because people are afraid of your power.
Yes, exactly. And we have to become more educated around, more educated citizens, period, about everything. And this is important. So education, 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 reading the legislation. So I want to ask you this question. You know, what I know you said you're meeting tomorrow, and we're going to send, you know, good prayers and all the good energy towards you as you do your part. But overall, what can we expect from this administration, and what do you expect of us as American citizens? Because we must do this all together.
I expect and I request and I respectfully ask you to do everything you can to help us pass the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and to also know what you are able to do around what's happening, not only in terms of Washington, D.C. and what you do to act, but also what's happening in the various states. Because
Yes,
at every level. And remember, when we're talking about voting, it's about who you vote for to be the local sheriff.
exactly.
Vote for to be the mayor. It's about who you vote for to be the person who makes decisions about educating your children. And
Exactly.
school boards. All of these things are at stake. And so I want to ask everyone to just help us raise and lift the voices around why this is so important. And like you said, Dr. King, this is so much bigger than a Democratic or a Republican. This is about an American right that people are trying to take away in terms of access to the right to vote. Because we all have the right to vote. But the question,
Yes.
what does that right mean if you don't have access to the ballot, to putting your voice to action through your vote? And so, but it is good to see.
Good to see you too, and just for everybody, you know, we just continue to pray for and thank God for those legislators out of Texas, the courage and bravery that we need more courageous leadership like that, because this was not just a political act for them. They took moral leadership, you know, to a whole nother level. And that's what it's going to take, the braveness, the boldness, and new levels of civil disobedience in the spirit of nonviolence. So thank you for being with us today. And we're just going to continue, as that mother said, we're going to win it in this generation.
There you go. The great
Collectively.
Edison King and the great Dr. Bernice King.
Thank you, Vice President Kamala Harris.
I'll see you later.
See you later.
Bye-bye.